Okay. Hello. Nice to be here with you tonight. And it's this particular exercise to talk about yourself. And usually you are invited to talk about your work. And even if it's sometimes difficult to put words into your work, I think it is ultimately an easier task because it relies on explaining personal or collective choice that you took to achieve the projects presented. So talking about yourself involves talking about things that you have not voluntarily chosen, and notably where you come from. So it is therefore a question of explaining, for me, to explaining the inexplicable. So I will try to tell it all in 20 minutes. So I have to share the presentation. So here we are. This one. Is it okay for you? So, okay. So I think that for me, from the start, and without knowing it, architecture was present. Not by my family, because no one was an architect there, near or far. My parents were both scientists, and my mother in neuroscience, and my father as a physician. But the setting for my first 7 years was the Cité Radieuse, because I was born in Marseille, and of course I had no idea who was Le Corbusier. I lived it without knowing it, in fact. But I have many, many, many memories of my childhood. And in this place, that the inhabitants of Marseille nicknamed La Maison du Fada. It means in English, the house of the fool. So I live in and grew up here, a city within a city, and giving the opportunity to form a real community, in fact. Yes, I played on the roof, like in the picture you saw. It's in the same period, I think so. It's not my photos, but it's at the same times. So it was my home, and as you saw in the picture, in its arts, you have apartments. It's more like a villa. In fact, it's split into 2 floors behind huge bay windows. And while in the center, you have corridors, text the appearance of real streets, wide and lively. And I remember shopping streets where, yeah, I was at the supermarket on the main street in my pajamas, in fact. And so I played with my friend in the interior streets where most of the entrance doors were open. It means that we went from an apartment to another. And I live on the 7th floor. I have my piano teacher on the 3rd one, and my school was on the roof. So a true vertical village. And when I think about it today, it was a real utopia in the city. So I was really not programmed to be an architect. But of course, I think it has an influence because everything does. So it's funny, I love these pictures. So it's me at 3. And at kindergarten, but it looked like this guy's a tribute to Jimi Hendrix, who died the same year as it is 1970. So you can recognize the concrete so dear to Le Corbusier in the background. This is in the kindergarten, and next to it you have enamel tiles that I made when I was 4, still in the kindergarten, and the exercise was to design our own house. And it's funny because I was managed to make a rectangle in a square. But I think everything is there. The stilts, the loggias, and the roof. So Marseille, for me, is the gateway to the south, to the Mediterranean. It's a city of mixing and bonding, human and urban. And this urban disorder, turned toward the sea and the horizon, carries with it a certain idea of beauty. There is life in Marseille and a real notion of pleasure of living, as well as a deep desire to be outside the rules. It's really important. It's a city of protest and contrast under an incredible natural light. So then I already moved from Marseille to Paris because of my parents' work since I was 7, 8 years. And it represents a transfer from one urban context to another, from one culture to another, from the south to the north. And the only link I had between Marseille and Paris was in fact music. Because I start the piano at 3 years old in Marseille, and I start the violin when I come in Paris. So I voluntarily choose this photo, which is not really beautiful from Paris, but which shows the real Paris, in fact. It's a real postcard of Paris. And Paris is different to the classic storytelling of Paris Center. And this is actually the real one. I think that all densities, like Paris, tell a story. They are made up of different layers from different eras, creating an organic, complex, and predictable environment similar to an organism. But I think that my really primitive, my first really memory of what I could name architecture is very emotional. I think it's a discovery during my teenage time of the Alhambra in Granada in Spain during a trip with my parents. And it was smell, light, shadows, and freshness of the fountains, water, refinement of the architecture. And the snoopers, the arcades, framing on the landscapes, and above all, refinement of the material, the richness of the soil. And for me, it was a shock, real one, real shock. So my passion was music, and I performed with a group of friends, organized concerts, and played for diverse audiences as part of festivals. So I choose architectural studies as the way both to continue music and to show my parents that I was embarking on higher studies. At the same time, I had the feeling that architecture has to do with music. So in 1984, I started my studies at Paris Belleville school within the UNO group created and directed by the Peruvian architect, Henri Siriani. And it was teaching chosen by feeling at the end of the first year, and which brought me back to Le Corbusier. Because during these years of study, I will discover that the Cité Radieuse was what was normality to me as a child, was suddenly seen as a spectacular piece of architecture. The building in which I grew up became to me an architectural masterpiece. But indeed, the pedagogy put in place by the UNO group takes Le Corbusier work as it does. So it was the learning of modern space and at the end of 6 or 7, sometimes more for me it was 10 years because I have to work, it was the establishment of a body of knowledge allowing projectual autonomy. So it was an architectural education that could be compared to my learning of classical music and the lesson I took during 10 years that I followed for 10 years at the conservatory. So it was acquisition of technical knowledge, repetition of range, etc. It was a classic and rigorous path allowing afterwards to develop one's own identity. So a technical achievement allowing full freedom of expression. And finally, I think that this learning of the rigor and the need to argue and justify an idea, even contrary to the dogma of this teaching, was for me a framework in which I had to confront myself and do violence to myself. And I'm grateful to Annie for that. So at this particular moment, that's why I put the domino house and the modular, but at this particular moment of my education, we can also see another types of architectural approach, new leaders like Rem Koolhaas or Jean Nouvel. And the work of Jean Nouvel was no longer composed or characterized by rationalism or functionalism, but rather by unpredictability, by the dimension of the unknown. And dimension of images, in particular, the cinematographic dimension of his projects, like in the Cartier Foundation that I show you on this picture in Paris, had a very important impact on how I will perceive architecture and how I will rethink maybe the way I got thought architecture. It is also the moment when I met Gaël, that you can see on the right part. And so still greatly involved in musical practice, our relationship will lead us to work together and define the beginnings of our professional adventure. Another very important moment in my construction as an architect was my meeting with Jose Mouri, with whom I will have my first professional and really learn the trade accelerated by this site for 3 years. It was through his son, with whom I shared my passion for music because we played together that I met Jose. So I was a fourth-year student at this moment, and I found myself overnight in charge of a project in Paris, and more particularly monitoring its construction. So Jose was living in the United States at this moment, and he was a dean from the architecture department of the Ohio State University. So the office was our apartment with Gaël. It was a great feeling of freedom and a daily improvisation, in fact, because we did everything in Paris without experiences. So it was an apprenticeship in the trade, on the job as Jose, I think, as Jose had experience in Le Corbusier office. And again, Corbu has a common thread on my young years practice, but since I ended up taking care of the restart of the project of the church in Saint-Pierre de Firminy that Jose and Corbu had designed a long time ago. So during my studies, I think that 2 books will have a very important impact. And surprisingly, it's not 2 books about architecture itself, but 2 books in which the city is the subject. The first one is Delirious New York from Rem Koolhaas, and it's, as said, Rem Koolhaas is a retroactive manifesto. We illustrate relationship between mutant metropolitan universe and the only architecture it can produce. He either say that architecture often generates culture. The other books is Learning from Las Vegas from Venturi, Scott Brown, and Stephen Eisner. And I think that behind the questioning of utopia arises questioning of the arrogance to which architects sometimes indulge. And to turn reality into a utopia by studying the landscape, such is the purpose of this book. And I think there is 2 parts. One, precise study of the street, but the other one is on the basis by the observation, it's made on the research of the representation of the city of Las Vegas. So 2 books and maybe 2 paintings also question me a lot in my way of looking at the city. And these 2 famous paintings speak beautifully, in my opinion, of 2 opposing visions of the city. And the first one is a painting of the Babel Tower from Peter Bruegel. And it shows an addiction of act and effort with an important goal to create new form. In this, it was to reach God and communicate with Him, but this makes an amazing piece of architecture. I mean, this great idea creates new, a unique form. Yes, it does not reflect the idea of beauty. There is no perfection in this picture. It is brutal sin that is not smooth, but it's an amazing organism. I mean, it's a mix of different elements. If you are scrolling in the picture, you saw many things, many humans who are working on this. And this creates magma, in fact. Intensity, complexity, and diversity are all captured when dissecting this painting. And I think it represents for me the complexity and brutality of the city, which is the reality of our modern city. And this diversity creates a unique piece of art. The second one is the famous painting La Città Ideale, and it speaks literally about beauty. And it presents a beautiful scene contrasting the Tower of Babel, which is chaotic. But would copying this perfection and beauty create perfect and beautiful architecture? Yeah, but where are the people? I mean that for me, architecture is not about perfection. I think that we need to find the way to make building flourish, but something very important is missing for the building to flourish. I mean, it's human life. And this image of the ideal city is for me an abstraction of beauty. It's a mental representation because there is no life, no essence of what a city really is. And it is finally a mental and generic environment. And I think that these two paintings demonstrate that we must understand that cities are an addition of complexity, organic elements, imperfection, layers, and brutality. So, filled with life. I think that cities have a connection with heritage and identity and are profoundly a human adventure. So, I just want to speak about two other books. One that I read during the first lockdown in April, about economics, so a pragmatic one, and the other one that I reread, not each year, but it's about poetry, in fact, but speak about cities too. The first one is a revolutionary book, I think, made by Nobel Prize Banerjee and Esther Duflo, and I think they make persuasive case for intelligent forms of intervention and doesn't sound research into real life situations, and the society built on compassion and respect. And I think that the important lesson from this book is that there is no truth in economics. And there is no the truth of the ground, the truth of the local framework. But there is no magic formula that can solve all problems. And we could easily replace, I think, the world economy by architecture. I mean that there is no formula in architecture, and each project is different, like the site, inhabitants, city, history, country. And I think that it's really dangerous to import models. I mean, this is generic versus specific. For the Città Invisibili, the book from Italo Calvino, it's pure poetry, in fact, and it's a new approach to the city. No longer as simple geographic space, but unit loaded with meaning and symbols. I mean that cities are a collection of many things, of memory, desires, signs, language. For sure, cities are a place of exchange, like in the economic books just before, but they are not only exchanges of goods, yeah? They are exchanges of words, exchange of desires, memories, and each city evoked opens onto an infinite and inexhaustible field of references. So, thought and sensation. I mean that the network of cities offers the image of an unknown world that remains to be discovered and described. This is an amazing book. And just to link this, I think that this interest in the city has found its extension in my teaching time. And I show you some pictures of a work started 10 years ago. And it started with students of the architecture school of Versailles with my friends David Trottin, with an architect of the Périphérique Group in Paris, and Franck Talon with a graphic designer in Bordeaux. And we continued after that with local students from the cities where we are going. For example, students of Takaru Tezuka at Tokyo City University, or those of Jean-Pierre Cruz at the Pontificat Universidad Católica del Perú in Lima. Public space, it's about the public space, and it is the city at eye level, where we can get a measure of the different things people do with urban space. So this work is an observation work. It presents subjective and factual selection of ways public space is used in different major world cities. And it's based on long walks in various neighborhoods, taking thousands of photographs, and we have regional selection of street scenes with a very precise graphic chart. So I think that drawing is the most efficient approach to show the public uses. And with these books, yeah, we were invited to be part in 2018 to be part of the Japanese pavilion at the Biennale, Venice Biennale, entitled Architectural Ethnography. So there we are with Momoyo Kajima, the curator of the pavilion and founder of the famous Japanese agency Atelier Boho. And this work continues today according to our respective agenda, and it's not easy. On the side of being teachers, we also decided to create a collective which was called French Touch. And it was a collective, lasted 7 years, and was born from the desire to meet between architects to show off and discuss projects or achievements. 15 agencies, architects age from 30 to 50, engage in production and education, and sharing desire for dialogue and action. So I think that the French production is rich and it is specific, and the diversity of its context and landscapes produces a complex eclecticism to define and show. And for the architects of this group of French Church, it was essential to take a stand and communicate the qualities of French architecture beyond our borders. So the ambition of this collective was to show this inventive and often overlooked architectural diversity. And by creating our own publishing house, the ambition was to show French architecture as it had never been shown in its diversity. So this has led us to have wonderful encounters throughout the territory, organizing debates and parties, forging links, and between architects so different. So Steven Lannos, as curator of the French pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2008, I think that music taught me to listen and instilled in me curiosity about others, and I cannot conceive of the profession of architect while remaining at the office to design just projects in isolation. So confronting ideas, sharing, discovering the great work of other architects is a driving force and a necessity for me. I mean that I think this is in turn richness for the office. And these are photos from my last trip just between, in January of this year, just before the lockdown, and it was in Colombia, and my meetings with remarkable architects, Javier Vera, Giancarlo Mazzanti, and Jorge Perez Jaramillo. And just to finish, I just want to show you this picture. It was a picture that I took during the lockdown. It was at my home, and as you can see, you see people who try to be free during this very important moment. And trying to have some users, different users, to in the street, in the roof, in their homes. And I think that because housing is the core of the city, I think that this particular period encourages us as whole to take a critical look at our living space. And the containment measures have led inhabitants to radically change their vision of their restricted environment. And we are all witnesses of the difficulties of many families, sometimes squatted in small spaces without balconies or terraces and with openings far too insufficient in terms of lighting and comfort. And in ever more dense and populated cities, I think that the quality of housing might be at the heart of all attention. And if we want a livable and generous city, I think that quality housing for all is a major issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your talk. It was very nice to have the opportunity to get to know you from that perspective. As you can stop the screen sharing so that I can see you.
I stop.
Thank you. That was very nice. Actually, those last pictures were very funny to see how it was for you during the lockdown and how can we learn from that. Actually, also for you being in a practice which is working so much in housing, it's very interesting to see what we learn from this. We have to do it in like around 5 minutes, the interview, because the talk was a bit longer than expected, but no problem. You mentioned, of course, music during your talk. To be in order a musician, you need creativity, but at the same time, discipline, a very strong discipline. What habits and lessons have you learned from music, and how are they useful in architecture?
I think that the lesson of music is to listen. If you are not listening, it's not possible to play. So I think this is the first and the main lesson I learned. I mean, you have to listen. And I think that in architecture, you have to see and to listen to the others. I mean, speak about the only one solution after. I think curiosity and the fact that you have to share things and you learn from the others. And I think you are better after that. And that's why I speak about meetings and travelings. And took times to learn from the other. And I think that music, without this discipline in technique, but you have the discipline of listening. And because to play the good note, you have to listen music.
When was the last time you played, and what instrument was that?
I think that, I played first piano, but after I play violin and guitar, but it was violin was my instrument, and electric violin too. So because I play jazz, I have to adapt because I play on different scene, in fact, in different stage. So, and I think that the last concert I did was in 1991. So it's a long time. And but I definitely finished my musician career, I think 2 or 3 years after.
No piano, no violin at home?
100% focused on architecture.
Okay, being a musician is such a hard career and path. It takes so long. And also architecture takes very long.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions more. You mentioned Gael, of course, during your talk. How is your collaboration with Gael, and how do you complement each other?
The fact is that we are very different. So I met her at school, so it's a long time ago. And and we are completely different. I'm not. I am from the south, and she is a North girl. So I think we are just complementary for this. But the fact is that we are always we're challenging. This is a question of challenging. Yeah, we play together, in fact. So there is. It's not a formula, and it's not. But yeah, one idea, you have to react on the idea, and so on and so on. And it's not like a game, but it's like yes, this is what we do. But it's a challenge all the time, and we other people of the office for sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It would be nice to have a talk like this with Gael.
I'm sure it will be completely different.
Yeah,
because we are different.
That's why it's so interesting.
I think for sure
to understand you. You have mentioned very last question. You have mentioned experimentation for you as a very important topic. How do you try to escape the experiences from the past in order to achieve freedom? Maybe in a kind of a short answer.
I think that
of course, if we try to achieve freedom, we have had so many experiences in the past.
Yeah, but I think I'd speak about heritage just during the lecture, and
that's right.
I think you are part of the story, so I need that experimentation for us is just normality. I mean that you are on the same way. Again, it's a question of heritage, but it's a question of specificity of identity. I mean that everything is linked, but experimentation, I think it's like in music. I mean that's nothing to do to play the same note every time. So I mean it's just in the DNA. When you are an architect, I think you have to experiment. It's the only way to be alive, in fact, for me.
That sounds great. Jean-Christophe, thank you for your talk. It was very nice. Also, thank you for the interview.
Yeah.
We will meet in 30 minutes for the roundtable discussion with Dominique Coulon. So thank you a lot. Thank you. We'll meet you later.